I'm Teresa Carraggio, and my topic today is the Isha, the Gita, and the Course. And I'm recording in San Diego, which you can tell by the frequent planes, and it's my last day with my daughters. So we're going straight from celebrating Lunar New Year last night to Galentine's Day. Let's get started. And I'm entirely reading this because I'm in a hurry, so you can either read it on Substack or listen at your pleasure. Nephihotep has been sharing his wisdom and insights on the Isha Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita, both of which he's studied in depth for decades. In my previous post, Bhagavad Gita and Palestine, I added insights from my study of the Gnostic Gospel of Philip and A Course in Miracles, which I've studied daily for a couple of decades. I'm going to continue that here because I think there's much commonality and that we are the mystics discerning the depths. As Kathleen Devaney wrote, the changes we are in the midst of, which we are largely still comprehending with tools and references, writings and frameworks from history, will upend so much that even teachings about eternal truth that were not easy to come by, making them all the more remarkable, will be directly accessible to many. As the time-space settings and corresponding frequencies shift, the best words I have, though still frustrating, and move into new bandwidths, literally what has been happening on our planet won't be able to, and what we strive to see will become standard knowing. Mystics and their insights then won't be rare, perhaps even super basic. And I love that from Kathleen. We have been talking, Kathleen and I, about innate human rights and moral codes, causing me to look up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Up until Article 26, these are all freedom from, or what are called negative human rights. These all seem perfectly agreeable until I realized they negated the most obvious, the right to self-rule or self-governance. For the United Nations, this is a way of imposing their superior right to determine morality and judge nations by it. So the conscience of a community is usurped. There's no respect that every group of people has equal access to what's right and wrong and the power to work that out among themselves without interference. On his post, Nephihotep writes, "There's no moral code, only you." Sorting out the distinctions between the seeker way and the believer way, as seen from the moral sense, can be difficult because the view of things from the outside is of course limited to just the outside events and circumstances. Though morality is mostly ruled by mind, it will vary between the two seemingly opposite ways of living. It will also vary among individuals too. There really are no such things as opposites. That's a mind trick. Ultimately, motives for how we live come from within, and that's where the real work is. The Isha Upanishad could be seen as a way to show us the true element of spiritual freedom that is naturally always there within each of us, manifesting in unique and wonderful ways. Truth is not found in uniformity nor conformity. It can be seen as unity manifesting through the diverse experiences of inner self. On my last post, along with some very nice compliments, Orion Dworkin commented, "The best part of any religion books are teaching morals and values to, at the very least, instill some common respect for self and others. Otherwise, we get a bit carried away in interpretations of everything written by those tricksters, apparently, like sacrifices and cultist phenomenon." I responded, "Your second paragraph got me thinking about the episode I'm working on now, responding to the Isha Gita from the perspective of the Course. Something they have in common is that they don't have a moral code. At the same time, I'm reading a book of young adult fiction, one of my favorite genres, called The Bad Muslim Discount. It's an interesting illustration of how those moral codes get weaponized and used to impose rule by superiority and domination, including violence. So I wonder if that is a good thing about religion. So this is The Bad Muslim Discount by Saeed Masood. And it parallels the story of a Muslim boy whose family comes from Pakistan to California and a Muslim girl who comes from Baghdad to San Francisco. Without making the characters into caricatures, it outlines the moral choices made, some in response to an outside authority of Islam, and some in response to an inner directive often counter to it. The choices made by men out of their sense of honor are disastrous to the women, particularly the one that you really care about. The author leaves you at the end of one chapter assuming that she is being beaten, perhaps to death, by the father who isn't her father, while the next chapter goes from that to describe a tender reconciliation love scene between the other two characters. Why in the world would they think that you would even read that you would care about that? And if you did read it, you'd be reading it with resentment. So I skimmed and seethed. In the end, I felt that both the obedience to authority and the rejection of authority were destructive because they didn't take the relationship between people as primary. And I've also been rereading this Introduction to A Course in Miracles, which is someone's interpretation. And it's not always an interpretation that I agree with, but I think it summarizes well why forgiveness of others is key. It writes, although the Course urges us to forgive both ourselves and others, its main focus is on the forgiving of others. Why is this? The answer is to be found in the nature of the ego. The essence of the ego, if we recall, is in an antagonistic relationship with all of reality, with God, others, and even ourselves. A thought of separateness from the whole and attack on the whole. The undoing of the ego is therefore the restoration of our mind's broken relationship with reality, a reuniting with ourselves, others, and God. In this mental process of reunion, it is other people who are our most immediate and potent representatives of the whole. God is too abstract, and I would add, is a projection of the ego. Our true feelings towards Him, both our infinite love and our titanic fear, are buried much too deeply. We ourselves are not appropriate representatives of the whole, for the ego has so profoundly convinced us that we are separate, that we gain from the loss of others. It is other people who become our best symbols of the whole we have rejected. It is in relationship to them that our mind can best work out its severed relationship with totality. Forgiveness of others is indeed the single greatest challenge to the ego. Our ego is usually undisturbed by our weak attempts to love God and to feel self-worth, but is rocked to the core by a true relinquishment of the entrenched condemnation and fear that keep us separate from another human being. Forgiveness goes well beyond the pardoning of specific offenses. It is, in principle, a deep-seated transformation of our entire defensive, suspicious, and uncaring posture towards another. And by healing our relationship with one, we transform our relationship with everything. The Course then is identifying our belief in the sinfulness and evil in other people as the key element of our dream. And I would go further in saying that identifying and pardoning specific offenses is actually counter to the concept of forgiveness. I think it starts by assuming that everyone does something for a reason, by giving forward the benefit of the doubt that there's always a why to what someone does. And I talk about this in one I'll link at the end called To Love Me is to Know Me. Love isn't some warm, fuzzy feeling. It's not this benevolence where you from above are giving to someone else. Instead, it's seeing someone as an equal and saying, okay, I know there's a reason you're doing this. I don't know what that reason is, but I need to know from your perspective what that reason is because I know it's there. It is definitely not accepting bad behavior. It's looking at bad behavior and asking why. Where I disagree with this interpretation of the Course is that it sees Jesus Christ as the voice that is narrating. And you all know how I feel about that. The Course says it is impossible to remember, and I think that's the opposite of dismember, to put together God in secret and alone. The lonely journey fails because it has excluded what it would find. The Holy Spirit's temple is not a body, but a relationship. So this would be contradictory that a single person named Jesus could single-handedly be the Christ because he was such a singularly holy and wise person. The Christ can only be found in a relationship. Rhonda, who writes his Wild Rhodey, has pointed out that Judas and Sadduq are the inverse of each other, kind of, a little bit of transposition. The two founders of the Zealot movement were Judas and Sadduq, or Zadok. Judas was the political leader, and Sadduq was the Pharisee who was the founder of the Sadducees. I remember someone saying as a mimetic device that the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection of Jesus, and that's why they were sad, you see. But what the Hasidic rabbi said on one of my episodes is that they rejected the Torah. So they rejected the right of the Shemitic dynasty to rule over everyone, and Judas rejected the right politically of the Romans to rule over them. It's the Gospels where Hebrews become Jews, and it's used as a curse against them. So I suspect that Jews was actually a term that got invented as a follower of Judas, and that Judeans were the followers of Judas. This is something that changes everything about how we see this text. So Judas is the socio and Sadduq is the spiritual of socio-spirituality. Between them, I think what they proved was that resurrection was inclusive, was super basic, as Kathleen would say, and that it pertained to everyone who was believing in each other. Who it didn't pertain to would have been Jesus, who was really Josephus, who believed that he alone was the Son of God and that he could resurrect, but no one else. So that's the inclusivity that creates the resurrection and the exclusivity that denies it, which is also what I think Nephihotep is saying about the Isha Upanishad and the Bhagavad Gita, that oneness is always inclusive. And for more on this topic, here is To Love Me is to Know Me, and this one is Forgiveness is the Shortcut. Thank you for watching.